This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have with us my good friend who I have arguably slept in more moving vehicles with than anybody else in my entire life. My good friend from Death Therapy and previously from Becoming the Archetype and from mine and his little side project called The Reverse List, Jason Wisdom. Hello, everybody.
That's me. Yo. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Jason and Josh have never met in ever.
I don't know how I feel about the sleeping in the vans intro piece, but that's okay.
It's true. I mean,
it happens.
It's true. I mean,
from my perspective, the Death Therapy trips have been way more like cush and like staying in hotels compared to the BTA days when we were just like eating ramen and had like $3 a day to live off of.
No, for sure. No, we're so it's more of like I think you and I have napped/slept in every possible moving vehicle.
I think that's true. Yes.
Because vans, we did a bus when we were in Germany on the way back to the airport.
And in Mexico.
Airplanes. I think the only one we haven't done is trains.
Yep, we need to do a train tour.
Train tour. We did an RV.
Josh is being left out of this over there.
I know.
I'm just absorbing all this. It's really nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You were just watching a bunch of TikToks while we were talking?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Behind the scenes, we were trying to start this episode, and Josh was unaware because we had a couple cancellations today. So Josh was just chilling at his computer watching TikToks. I was like, bro, where are you at?
I was literally sitting here with Zoom up.
Yeah.
And Drew FaceTime me, and he's like, where are you? Like, I'm around. What's up? We're waiting for you.
Let's do it.
That's so good. No. So Jason, if Josh doesn't know, Jason has been in the game for a hot minute. So just as a, I guess, primary songwriter in terms of lyricism, correct?
Correct.
And melody and whatnot. But let's take it back from the beginning. So let's get like how you got to becoming the Archetype days.
Becoming the Archetype. Right?
Yeah.
Well, I sort of got into music as an accident. I had a friend who we liked similar music. We were both super into like 5 Iron Frenzy and MXPX and things like that in the late 90s. And we found out that we had that in common when we were riding the school bus in high school. And then we became friends, but he was trying to start a band in his basement. This is Brent Duckett, or some people call him Duck.
Oh, yeah.
Who played drums in Becoming the Archetype. And he wanted to start a band in his parents' basement, and I was just kind of hanging around. No musical ability, really. I was in choir, but he was trying to start a metal band, so he didn't need me to sing choir vocals. And they already had vocalists and everything. I just sort of hung around. And I think there was an opportunity, if I remember correctly, for a battle of the bands where one of the vocalists couldn't do it. And because that's back in the, some people are old enough, they remember it was a super cool thing back then to have like 2 vocalists in a screaming band.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One would sing and one would scream. It was like the thing for a little while there. Not so much anymore. Or at least all the people that do that. Like one of them seems to keep getting busted for something and having to quit the band. But
that's
sorry.
Way too real.
It's already spicy. This is what I came for.
Sorry. What are we talking about?
I don't know.
I didn't mention any names.
No.
But it's happened more than once in the past couple of years.
In Atlanta.
Yeah. Anyway, all I'm saying is, so one of the vocalists couldn't do it. It was like Battle of the Bands at a high school. And we learned like a Zayo song from way back in the day and played it scared a lot of people to death. at a Battle of the Bands. And then I sort of guess I was in the band, so to speak. And then the bass player quit, and I didn't know how to play in any instruments or anything. I was like, well, if you just tell me which strings to push down, I'll try to learn. And so then I was singing and playing bass, and yeah, that was how I got into that. That band went through like 4 or 5 different names, and then got signed to Solid State Records in 2004, and changed our name to becoming the Archetype.
So yeah, Josh, if you didn't know, Jason plays bass and screams at the same time for all of, well, the Reversalist is a fake band, but the other 2 bands, Death Therapy and
it's an anime band.
For Death Therapy and Becoming the Archetype, he screams and sings for Death Therapy and plays bass at the same time.
That's crazy.
So like that puts for me.
It's easier though it's easier to do if you write everything.
Oh,
you know, because then you can just be like, well, I can't sing and play that, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then you could just make it something that works. But this new record I'm working on, I've been working with Nate Washburn, who's from the band My Epic, and we've been writing stuff together, which has been really challenging. But a lot of these songs, I'm like, there's just no way. There's just no way I could ever play and sing this at the same time. So
it's like Daniel Gailey writing your parts again.
We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna have to pass the bass off to Andrew.
No.
And I'll just jump out into the crowd.
It's like, did Daniel, when Daniel was in the band, did he ever write parts where you were like, oh goodness?
So when I was in the band with Daniel, I was only in the band with Daniel for 1 album.
Mm-hmm.
And we, hey Josh, how's it going? You can't see Josh, but
Seagraves.
Josh Seagraves is over there, and he can't hear you because I have headphones on.
Oh, tell him I said hey.
But that's the drummer for Death Therapy. Anyway, podcast people are like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, Daniel. So Daniel was playing in a little band. Daniel's like super famous now, so like talk about. I'll just name drop Daniel Gailey. He's in Fit for a King for people who don't know, and Phineas. And he was in a little band in Cleveland, Georgia, and BTA sort of needed a guitar player, and he was there. And joined us for 1 record, and he and I would get together, and I would go, hey, I want to do a guitar part that goes like, and he'd be like, okay, and he'd play it on guitar, and it's really corny. So like I wrote some of that stuff, but I just never with an instrument. It was just always with like air guitar, mouth vocals, and Daniel would make it actually an instrumental thing. So
that was really cool. So we're gonna move on from Death Therapy. I mean, to Death Therapy level area stuff in a little bit. I don't want to talk too much about BTA, but there are 2 stories that I want you to tell Josh that I know about. So number 1 is, and you can choose which order to do this. So number 1 is Daniel Gailey in the van. Number 2, which is a great one, and number 2 is going to Vancouver to record, what was it, the 2nd or 3rd album?
3rd record with Devin Townsend.
Devin Townsend.
Yeah. So we'll do the Daniel in the van story.
Yeah, this is a great story.
First, you hanging in there, Josh?
Oh, I am.
You on the edge of your seat?
So Josh, this one's absolutely for you.
Yeah, this is for you. So back in the day, BTA used to tour a lot. And then we weren't necessarily on the most comfortable tours. We were just in a little van and, kind of DIYing it around the country. And we found ourselves at one point outside of Baltimore, if I'm remembering correctly. DC, Baltimore area, and traffic is notoriously awful there. It's sort of like having Atlanta and LA next to each other. And we were sitting in traffic that was so bad that we were just like in park for hours at a time. Nobody was moving at all. We were super tired from being on the road. The other band that was on tour with us, by the way, if Andrew doesn't know this part of the story, is the band Onward to Olympus. That, if you remember them, they were on Face Down Records back in the day, and their singer Kramer Lowe went on to be in a band called Forevermore that was on Solid State Records. Anyway, really cool bands. If you don't know, this is like old school. But anyway, they were touring. They were up in front of us, so we're 2 vans just sitting, doing nothing, right? Bored out of our minds, super tired. And Daniel is in the back of the van, and he's got a sleeping bag, and he like zips himself up completely over his head in the sleeping bag. So he's like a blue worm in a sleeping bag. And he comes jumping over and bouncing on the seat in the back of the van. And we're all just cracking up laughing because if you've ever been that tired,
Everything's hilarious.
everything's funny. Yeah, everything's funny.
Yeah.
I've told people, I'm like, I think you go through like a couple phases. You go through the phase where everything's annoying, and then if you get past that, everything's
You hit
hilarious.
that wall where it's like, oh, that's hilarious.
Right.
no
So
reason.
we're just like, oh, this is hilarious. This is the funniest thing. I was in the driver's seat. Seth, guitar player, is in the passenger seat, and I was like, what would be hilarious? Seth, you should pick up Daniel on your shoulder, run up to the Onward to Olympus van, like throw open their doors and toss Daniel in the sleeping bag, and like it'll just freak him out, and Daniel can like bounce around and like go crazy, and it'll just be hilarious. This is obviously people are like, that's not really that funny, probably, but
That's
to
hilarious.
us at the time it was
I
like,
think
this is the most genius idea we've ever had. It's like
Someone
when it's the
call
middle of the
Elon
night and a
Musk.
Burger King commercial
Like-
comes on, and you just like cracking up about how stupid the little plastic face king guy looks or something. That was us. We were just like, this is the best idea. We have to do this. So Seth gets out, opens the doors, gets Daniel up on his shoulder, ready to go up to their van. And that's when traffic decides to start moving, finally. So Seth's kind of like adjusting Daniel around, kind of like almost drops him, picks him back up, puts him back, stuffs him back into the van. And we roll. We're rolling on. But as we start moving, cars are coming by on the left and the right, and people are like craning their necks. Like, what's going on in that van? And I look at the guys, and I'm like, I don't know what they think we were doing, but obviously they don't think it was good. But I still, at this point, we'd have no idea. So we get down the road a little ways. We're not going probably more than 5 miles an hour, and there's 2 state troopers parked on the left side of the road. And I was like, okay, that's for us. There's like no doubt those guys are here for us. So honestly, some of the details of the story may have become like, if you ever seen the movie Big Fish, this like may have been a little exaggerated. I don't really know, but I swear to this day that I saw the state troopers and just like, they didn't even hardly have to turn their lights on, and we already pulled over. I was just like, yep, okay, it's for us. The lights kind of started to come
we
on, and I
have to
pulled over.
explain that it's a guitarist
Yeah.
in a sleeping bag.
So we pull over, and of course, I'm expecting that, crap, we're going to get a ticket, There's going to be some guy in a wide brim hat with aviator shades is going to come up and write us a ticket in this ticket book and tell us, quit playing on the highway, you idiots. And
Normal stuff.
When I look in the mirror, though, that's not what I saw. I saw police officers in like full-blown Call of Duty SWAT team mode with their guns out, like hunkered down, swooping around the van on both sides, coming for us, coming in hot. And then all of a sudden they start banging on the sides of the van, which is, it's like a passenger van, so it's kind of hollow, so it's really loud when they're banging on the van inside. And there's guys like sleeping in the back, and we're like, wow, what's going on? So the story goes, at least from the other guys, they claim that I said in a very monotone, quiet voice, I said, they've got their guns out. Which is like the most understated thing. And they were like, what? Really? And I was like, they've got their guns out. So they start screaming, get out of the van, get out of the van. Everybody else gets out of the van on the right side of the van. The one passenger door over there. And then I'm out by myself on the left side. As soon as I get out of the van, there's a gun like right in front of my face, and the police officer screams, get on the ground now or I'll blow your effing head off. And I'm just like, ah. And like, the fastest I've ever moved in my life into the grass on the shoulder of the highway, just laying there by myself. Everyone else is on the other side. And you can hear the police are running around screaming, where's the girl? Where's the girl? And I found out later, as everybody else started to get up and was explaining to the police officers what was going on, I was still laying there. They come around and finally get me up, and they're explaining to them that people had called the police and said that we were kidnapping a girl in a sleeping bag on the side of the highway. And they were coming after us, man. They were coming in hot. They went up and searched Onward to Olympus van to make sure that we hadn't hid the girl up there. And I've told this story, and every time I tell the story, I'm like more and more in shock that none of us had a girlfriend with us on tour. And I'm so grateful, because if we had, we'd all gone to jail. You know what I mean? Even if
Yeah,
she'd have been like,
they
no,
would've just
it
arrested
wasn't me.
everybody.
It was
Like-
Daniel. He was asleep. They'd have been like, nope, you're going to jail. Straight to jail.
Wow.
Also
That's
jail.
crazy.
Yeah.
That
So
legitimately, that is one of the first time you ever told me that. I thought I knew where it was gonna go. You know, he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, they're gonna get pulled over. Haha, that's funny." And
Yep.
then it escalates. That's like
Well,
straight to 11.
I saw
Yeah.
it coming that they thought that you were kidnapping somebody, but I didn't expect it to be like so violent.
yeah,
Like,
it was
I
pretty
thought-
well. And here's the
because
thing.
like the
here's
nature of the
thing.
situation, you know, like you would think that they would just
Yeah.
come up and be like, oh, you know, we're doing like a wellness check sort of thing, you know,
Right.
like
Hey, just making sure you guys know you have a taillight out. Are there any girls in your van? You know,
yeah,
like,
right.
but
Like,
no.
I didn't expect them to just like pull everybody out and like, oh, that's crazy.
I guess
It's
it makes
DC.
sense. I mean, you can't really come in like all chill if there's suspicion that they've kidnapped someone.
But
you know?
also, like, I feel like that's rather irresponsible to just like pull up threatening to like kill everybody. If like people are
As a
actually
hostage,
kidnapping
yeah.
a girl and they have guns and people are starting to shoot, like that's very dangerous for a lot of people. Like, good thing you weren't like kidnapping somebody because like a bunch of like random people probably would have died.
Man, yeah,
That's
you're probably
crazy.
right.
I
I would
didn't
also
think
say
about
it's
that.
just good that I wasn't kidnapping someone because otherwise, that's horrible.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we wouldn't even know.
Regardless of what else happens,
Yeah,
it's a good thing you weren't
a terrible
Kidnapping.
person.
full
Yeah, I mean,
stop.
good thing you weren't kidnapping anybody because like worst case scenario.
Yeah,
Oh, that sounded bad.
Right.
Like that's like the least of the worries.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's the actual act.
Yeah.
But I mean, you
Anyway.
get what I'm saying, though. That's crazy that they just came up like ready
Yeah.
to kill everybody.
super hot. Yeah, they were ready,
Yeah.
dude.
No doubt.
Uh,
So the other story is it's not really a story like that one is.
no,
but
it's just a cool. It's just a cool thing. Like,
yeah.
no,
we got
Devin
to-
Townsend doesn't really nowadays doesn't work with anybody.
No, there was like a tiny little window of time when Devin Townsend, who he was in the band Strapping Young Lad, that was really successful, did a ton of stuff back in the day. He was like the MC for Ozfest for a while there. He's like a legitimate metal personality, superstar
like,
guy. You know, Devin
just-
Townsend band. He's done a million things. He was the singer for Steve Vai back in the '90s. He's an all-around musical genius kind of
He's
guy.
a nuts
There was like
guitar player.
a tiny little window of time where he was producing bands, and he wasn't making metal himself. And that's an interesting part of the story. Is so we got to record with him. We show up and we're this like squeaky clean church boys Christian metal band. We're only scary to
And this
the
was
church
for
people.
this was for which album? I can never remember.
Dichotomy. It was our third BTA record, 2008. This is,
Okay.
and we're only scary to like church ladies, but to Devin Townsend, who's been like, he's lived, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that was his life. It's a weird thing. He's quit playing metal at that point in his life because he thinks it's all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll and chaos and evil. And he explained all of this to us. And we're telling him like, no, like we love metal because it sounds cool. And, we love Jesus too. And he's just like, this is weird. So we actually had a really cool experience, talking with him and ate a lot of pierogies and poutine and stuff in Canada. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life, off the coast of Vancouver.
I was gonna say,
been-
he's got like an island, right?
Well,
Isn't that
it was
what it was?
that's where he had a place that he was recording at the time. It's
Okay.
not there now.
But I'm saying
but-
at the time.
At the time, yeah, we went to this little place called Gibson's, BC, which is off the coast of Vancouver. Absolutely gorgeous. You had to take a ferry boat to get there. We got to do pre-production in this studio live room that belonged to I don't know if you pronounce it Garth, GGG Garth, guy who did like the old original like OG Rage Against the Machine stuff, and like has done a ton of cool stuff. Got to do
You just piqued Josh's interest so heavy.
Yeah, we
Josh
got
was
to
like,
do-
So cool.
Yeah, not
So
when Rage Against the Machine like blew up, but like going way back.
Yeah. It was
Anyway,
like the early live room stuff that they did when they were all
yeah, and
playing in the same
he's
room.
super cool place, and it was just beautiful. Devin was super like old school. He was just like, "So you guys ready to play these songs for me?" And we were like, "Nah, we've written them on email and stuff." And he's like, "Nope, that's not how we do albums." So he put us in that live room thing with a PA speaker with the click track coming through it, and was like, "Cool, I'm gonna like leave you guys in here until you're ready to play these songs for me, and then I'm gonna come back in and make them better." So it's super cool, and one of the best, if not the best, experience I've ever had recording. He's just a genius. If you go listen to that record now, it's weird for me to say I'm a fan, but I'm just a fan of what he did with the record. It's the Dichotomy record for Becoming the Archetype.
Yeah.
Super cool, great production. It holds up to this day.
I remember, I think whenever me and you talked about it the first time, you were saying that he was like, because this was post Strapping Young Lad, but before Devin Townsend project.
Well, so Devin Townsend band had been around since even back in Strapping Young Lad days, and that was more rock stuff. But his newer incarnation of Devin Townsend project, where he's done like some heavier stuff again.
Yeah, this is like
It was before that.
Yeah, it was before that. So, and this is post Strapping Young Lad, and Devin Townsend band is just kind of like a thing that he does on the side, and he's doing production. He had burn out on, like you said, the whole sex, drugs, rock and roll thing in the Strapping Young Lad days, because they were wild. Like they're known for being crazy.
And that was his thing. He was like, if you're doing metal, that's why you do metal. And we were like, no, that's not why we do metal.
And that's what I was going to say, because I remember you saying like, it was something about like the riff or something.
Oh yeah. Well, so Devin's super into, and to this day, he still is super into like new age, like energies and like chakras and like vibes and stuff. And there was a couple of times where we'd be like jamming a riff, and he'd be like, "Here, give me the guitar. Let's do it this way instead." And one time in particular, I remember he grabbed the guitar and he was like, "Okay, let's play it like this." And he changed it, and it wasn't even that crazy or anything. It's not like he started playing some like demonic chord sounding things. He just was like a gallopy riff that he changed up, and he almost got like frightened noticeably on his face of the power of the riff, and like handed the guitar back to John and like left the room and went to the beach to like meditate. And there were a couple other times where like he was working on a song, mixing it. There's one song on the record that has this like big production ending that's got like buzz saws and drill sounds. It's just like nasty and gross thing. And I can remember him saying like, "I'm never going to produce anything like that ever again." It's like the song's so evil and negative energy and all this kind of stuff. So that was always like a little bit of a back and forth kind of thing. And, didn't find out until many, many years later that apparently, I'm not saying we were the reason, but I think we had a little bit of a hand in him coming back to playing like heavy music. But now if you listen to everything he's done since then, it's all been like heavy, but with a super like positive twist or like spiritual thing.
He
So
realized,
it's not like,
I think I would say that he realized with you guys, because that was his first instance with this, that you can take metal and religion or something spiritual and combine those things in a positive way.
I think that's fair. And he's said as much in some like,
yeah, he's referenced you guys in like interviews and stuff as being a defining instance of that.
Yeah, so that's cool. And I'm definitely, he's a hero of mine to this day. So, but that's my Devin Townsend story. Oh,
yeah.
And then when we got off the plane, we met him, and he took us to eat barbecue. This is the first place we went. Well, Devin's a vegetarian, and we were in Canada. But I think he's just like, well, these guys are from Georgia, so I got to take them to get some
barbecue
meat, some barbecue or something. I've looked back on that. I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's actually really nice.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. It's great.
That's like,
although I don't know about Canadian barbecue.
I would never want like a vegetarian to take me to barbecue in Canada, because like it would make me feel bad, but at the same time, the fact that like he thought to do that is like really sweet.
Yeah, 100%. And that was his whole. I mean, Devin's a super sweet guy. I think that's part of his charm. It's part of what people love about Devin Townsend. Like you can follow him online, and like every other day there's some post like, "Hey guys, how you doing this morning?" You know, just like a little smiley face cat emoji or something. And that's just Devin's personality.
Yeah.
You know, which is such a departure from what his image was, with the like nasty skullet dreadlocks and like being the coked up crazy guy, you know, for so long. So
For sure.
it's kind of cool. I hope that one day I can, you know, become that much of like a metal dad.
Dude, yeah, he is the ultimate metal dad. Let's be real.
Yeah, his promo photos that I see now on interviews, he's wearing like the Hawaiian shirt and the Crocs, and he's got the guitar and the big like floppy hat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this
Josh
is
is
my
looking this
dream.
up right now. Josh is looking this up right at this moment.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about him.
Dude, Devin
Which makes me
Townsend's
feel really
awesome,
bad.
man.
I just know he's like really, really popular, and he's like you said, the father of metal.
Well, I don't know if he's the father of metal. He's definitely like metal.
Well,
but
one of the fathers.
the
of
thing
metal.
about Devin is that he's like a smart guy's. He's like intelligent people metal.
Yeah.
So like he's not, you know, he's not on the same level as like Lamb of God or
Oh my goodness.
someone like that. He's like just barely below that. Now there was a time when Strapping Young Lad was definitely at that top level.
Yeah.
Tell me why he like transformed into the Seth Godin of metal.
Dude, that's exactly what he is.
He turned into the Seth Godin of metal. That's it. Does he talk like whenever he talks? Does he have like a really soothing, like calm voice?
Yeah, pretty much. Did you
There he
see
is.
this photo? Wait, I don't know if it'll be.
Yeah, that's the one I just looked at.
Yeah. I'll throw it up. I'll throw it up
The
on the
Crocs
screen.
are so tight.
on the YouTube video.
But I mean, even I think I think this is a perfect. Yeah, we're spending a lot of time talking about how awesome he is.
Well, yeah, but he is. I mean, that was a defining moment in your musical career.
And you
it
can go
kinda-
watch. You should. Yeah, Josh. If you don't know you should just go watch some of his like live performances he's done in the past few years. He's got some where like he'll bring like circus performers up on stage with him, and like just crazy stuff.
From a level of creativity, like, and the reason I want to bring up that story is there's a lot I know that you learned from just doing that.
Right. Well, and I would also say this. So from like a production and making music standpoint, like Devin does everything the wrong way. And what I mean by that is there's no sense in spending that much time and effort on music anymore, but he does. And that's why I love it. So when I say the wrong way, I mean that in scare quotes, like as in like the industry now is like just crank out the content, and you really don't need to spend like 2 years working on a record because the return is not worth it. But Devin's the kind of guy who'll still spend like $200,000 out of his pocket to go fly to. I mean, you can find these videos online. He'll like fly to Europe and hire a choir of people to sing songs that are about cheeseburgers and stuff, like for his album, and just like silly stuff. And he'll do a performance in Royal Albert Hall or something like that costs him a ton of money out of his pocket, but so that's a huge influence on me. I mean, Nate Washburn and I were talking about this new Death Therapy record. We were like, man, this record doesn't make any sense. Like we've been working on it for a year and a half. Nobody should be doing this, you know, like to make like a rock or metal record, like we should be able to crank it out in like, you know, a couple weeks in the studio and be done. But we just keep working on it. So,
but it sounds super cool. Like,
yeah, we're trying to make something kind of hi-fi and kind of different and kind of like, oh man, listen, I can hear the fuzz pedal in this, like as a versus like it just sounds like distortion that comes from a box, you know.
Let's go from like ending of BTA. So I know the last record you weren't of Becoming the Archetype, you weren't necessarily in the band. I know you rode on it though.
The last record that they did, the I Am record, 2013. Yeah, I didn't write any music, but I wrote some of the lyrics.
Yeah. So, and that was your first, it was weird because it was the band that you were in, but it was your first instance of writing lyrics for other people, even though it was technically your own band. So,
yeah, well, and that was actually just more of like a creative brainstorm. I actually just, if I remember correctly, I just sort of had an idea one night laying in bed, which is usually where I have my ideas. I'll be asleep or about to fall asleep and I'll have an idea and have to get up. And I had a concept for an album and just basically wrote those lyrics, and I just sort of volunteered them to the new vocalist of BTA. I was like, hey, would you want these? If you don't, cool. If you do, cool.
Yeah.
And they ended up using them, and that was cool.
Yeah. So
funny story about that. Before they did that record, they did a Christmas song, which they did a metal version of "Oh Holy Night," which is on like the Solid State Christmas playlist.
Mm-hmm.
And every single Christmas, I get tagged like thousands of times. This is my favorite Christmas metal song, Jason. You killed it, and I'm not on that song. That's after I left. It's like right after I left. So fun little story about that.
That's so funny.
Yep.
So, that was like your first instance of songwriting for something other than your normal BTA stuff, even though it was still for BTA. They also shifted stylistically. Now you kind of left, and then like, what was the impetus for Death Therapy moving forward? So like, how did you get from I'm gonna play thrashy death metal really fast to I'm gonna make rock electronic music?
Yeah, well, honestly, it was again, this goes back to it being sort of an accident. I didn't really play any music at all for like 4 or 5 years, and didn't really even touch my bass guitar. And then I had a teaching job, and I thought I was going to transition from doing a teaching job into working for a nonprofit called RIFO that provides host homes and resources for bands that are on tour. RIFO.org, RYFO.
Yep.
Rock Your Face Off is what it stands for.
We've used some of those houses on tour.
Yeah,
before.
for sure. We've
They're
stayed at
super
those
nice
houses
people.
on tour. And so I was going to work with them as a missionary for that nonprofit organization. And I'm a Southern Baptist raised kind of person, so I failed miserably trying to raise money for myself. I'm not good at that. So I found myself like, okay, well, what can I do to raise some money? And I was like, well, what if I write a couple songs? I didn't think it was going to be a band. I was like, well, I don't really want to have to worry about getting a band. I'll just write stuff with my bass guitar and program some drums. And that sort of morphed into a Death Therapy thing. And I honestly had no idea what it was going to sound like. I was just like, what if I just don't have a plan? What if I just write, stream of consciousness style? So the first Death Therapy record was kind of written like that. The second record was a little bit more, okay, I think I want this to be electronic rock, but with a little bit of metal vibe. And then I realized as I'm writing this new one, I was just like, it's just not metal enough for metalheads. So I'm not really going to try to scratch that itch. And I'm just going to go for what I want to do, which is I just want to make groovy, heavy, dark, alternative rock stuff with the electronic elements and vibe. And so that's where Death Therapy is landing now. And I think that's probably where Death Therapy will stay. And we'll see how it works out. Maybe some people are going to be like super bummed that I'm not screaming all the time or, gurgling into the microphone like a demon. But we can do that with the Reversalist, and they'll just be able to go listen to that instead.
Well, what I was going to say is
do all the legs.
For those that don't know, I play with Jason and Death Therapy. I play keys for Jason live. And we still play we still play a lot. Honestly, the majority of our set is from the first record right now.
Yeah, we still play because the energy is really high, and
exactly
people know that. And the second record kind of came out. It's weird. Like the first record was a thing where I think a lot of people checked it out because they remembered Becoming the Archetype. By the time the second one came out, it was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really into this like electronic thing. So then the second record didn't really blast off,
even though it was less electronic.
I think the second record's awesome, and actually I think BTA fans would like it. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're like, "Oh man, I just remember when he was in Becoming the Archetype. Shut up talking about this new band. This new band sucks." Like, well, go listen to the second record, the Voices record, like track 1, track 2, track 8, and track 9, or the first 2 tracks and the last 2 tracks are just like straight off of a BTA record.
Yeah, they are.
they totally could be in a BTA record.
For sure. Yeah, you wrote them, especially the last 2 tracks. They are very much like this big, epic, symphonic, like BTA style,
Right.
almost death metal, but it's more electronic, or not even electronic. It's more scored, I would say.
Right.
Like a
But also, it's
BTA
like
record.
I can't, it's not going to accomplish a whole lot of metal without a guitar. So
Exactly.
with just the bass, it's kind of like you just getting the rhythmic stuff going down. But
Exactly.
there's a big like harpsichord solo in the middle, which is like totally a BTA thing that we would have done back in the day. We love to, that's something that Devin inspired in us. Going back to that, when we recorded our record, the last record I did with BTA, we were recording with Matt Goldman, who's a good friend, and I've kept up with him over the years. Play board games together.
Yep.
But like, so we just were like, well, what if we brought in a guy to play sitar? And Goldman's like, cool. And Goldman loves the Beatles, so he had to be in. He had to be in with that. We're like, what if we brought in somebody to like play the saxophone on this song? Oh, cool. So we got the guy from 5 Iron Frenzy to play a saxophone solo on a song. Not a saxophone solo, trombone solo.
Trombone solo, yeah.
Trombone solo. Actually, there's a saxophone solo on the new Death Therapy
Did
record.
Chris do that one?
Yep, Chris Bowman did
Heck
that
yeah.
one.
The homie.
So, yeah, it's awesome.
That's so sick. So with the new record, like, what is your, if you had to try to describe, like, what is your personal influences in this? Because I know Josh is like super into bands like Death Heaven and super into bands like that. Like, what would you describe as your, like, the impetus of like a bunch of different types of bands that crush together make your thing that you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think the new one, the bands we've talked about when we've been recording it is probably the best way to describe it. So it's like, it's going to sound different than them. No one would pick up on those things probably, but like we've been talking a lot about like Gorillaz, and we've been talking a lot about like Royal Blood is an obvious one because it's a 2-piece band with a bass player with lots of fuzz and stuff. Arctic Monkeys, 9 Inch Nails is kind of an obvious one. But that's all those just basically just the general vein of like dark but catchy electronic rock music is kind of what we've been shooting for. Death from Above 1979 is great band that in some ways definitely is the predecessor to Royal Blood. So yeah, I mean, we've just been kind of trying to put all that stuff in a blender, but also, like I say, we've been like, oh man, we do this thing that sounds kind of like what Kings of Leon used to do, or what if we do this thing that sounds like, I mean, we're just picking all these weird references and trying to do them, and I'm like, man, I wonder if anybody will ever notice that that's what we did. And we're like, nah, nobody will ever pick up on that. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Josh,
what do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, dude.
I think that's really cool. I think it's important to like pull references from like everything that you enjoy, because at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of great music out there, and there's a lot of great things that you can pull from really crazy places, and I'm always fascinated by bands who do that, like like Matty Healy is notorious for referencing like old new wave songs and different artists that he really enjoyed, and kind of like putting them into the work, because it's also a part of his story, because like as storytellers, the artists that we enjoy are a part of our story. And so I think that's really cool.
I can remember being like 19 years old, playing in a up and coming metal band, in Becoming the Archetype, before we were called Becoming the Archetype. And I can remember having this attitude, sort of like, we're going to change everything. We're going to make the most unique music that anyone's ever made. And we're going to push all the boundaries, and you know what I mean? And there was a time in my life where maybe that's totally like a 20-year-old energy thing. I don't know. But like, I was just, I'm going to revolutionize the music industry with this. I'm going to like, not only am I going to change the music, but like I'm going to make this new blend. Like, we thought we were cool. We're going to put Christian lyrics over like metal. And of course, everybody was already doing that. but we thought, we were like 2 years behind.
Yeah.
Which is totally, Andrew and I've joked about this before. Like, I've been putting out these records that are sort of like with Death Therapy that sort of have this like 90s industrial vibe.
You've been doing
but
this
with the metal, and like now I'm watching all these other bands come up that are huge and they're doing it, and I'm like, wait, I'm doing this too. Do I not get any credit?
Like, you've literally been doing it for like 3 years longer than everybody else. That's what's hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's starting to become kind of a thing, and so now I guess what I'm getting at is that's literally a perfect way of describing with this new record. I'm sort of like, I'm a lot more mature in the way I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, why don't I just write stuff that sounds like what I like,
Yeah,
there's no harm in that. Number one, I mean, no one's gonna recreate the wheel. And secondly, like if it's, so a band, for example, I think Andrew and I've talked about this before too. Like, whether you like them or not, a band like the 1975 is a perfect example of someone who every time you hear one of their songs, or at least every time I hear one of their songs, I go, wait a second, I've heard this before somewhere. But then I can't quite put my finger on it. So it's not like they're straight ripping anybody, but they just pull together the influences that they have in a really creative way so that it feels familiar and it feels like a warm blanket, but it also is new.
Yeah, like their song "Give Yourself a Try." I don't know. I might be thinking way too deeply into this, but the lead guitar in that song is very upfront and it's very annoying. It sounds like an amp sim without a cab IR after it. It's just ear piercing, right? And it goes like throughout the whole song, like it never takes a break. And so when that song dropped, everybody was talking about how much they hate that guitar. But that's like a really iconic riff because it's the exact same guitar part that's in Disorder by Joy Division.
Ah, there you go.
It's the exact same thing. And like, I don't know. I think like things like that are cool. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like,
right.
Sometimes it's about introducing a new audience to things that they've missed out on.
Yeah, because I had never listened to Joy Division, and I didn't even know about that until Josh was like, yo, Matty Healy loves Joy Division, obviously. Look at this 1975 song versus look at this Joy Division song, and you play them right next to each other, and even like the first it's similar enough that you're like, he obviously like is influenced by this.
Like they did that on purpose.
But it's like the same structure and everything. It's so cool.
Like he's a huge Fleetwood Mac fan, and like you could tell that Roadkill is definitely like his take on an old Fleetwood Mac song. And like he hired one of his like favorite producers from his childhood. He hit him up to license one of his songs so he could use samples, and the guy was like, no, like I'll just make you new samples. And so like he sent him all this stuff. It was some like indie garage producer, like, and their latest record is super strange because a lot of it is like garage and stuff that we don't get as Americans, but if you're from the UK thing. It's very nostalgic. And I think that things like that are interesting because all of the Gen Z kids that are going to their concerts, like they more than likely didn't grow up with that kind of music, right. So it's cool that he's just like doing it for the art of doing it.
This is a whole nother rabbit trail, but like I feel like a lot of people love to crap on, whoever's popular or whatever. That's just kind of a thing that people do. Nickelback or Creed or whoever is like the classic examples of people just crapping all over.
Recently, Billie Eilish.
But like, I'm specifically thinking of bands that have like, guitar heavy songs and stuff. And to me, I'm like, man, I love guitar music. I grew up on guitar music, grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so if there's a band like the 1975, if there's a band like Ghost, who's another band that everybody craps on, like, I'm just like, yeah, or Five Finger Death Punch even, or Alter Bridge or whoever you want to talk about. I'm like, dude, but they're playing riffs. I love riffs. I love guitar parts. If Post Malone is doing this thing now where he's like totally revealing that he grew up as like a 90s alternative kid, but then took a sidetrack into like hip hop, and now he's like coming back around to like, hey, let me just jam Nirvana songs and Alice in Chains songs. Well, that to me, there's people out there like, this is so dumb. They crap all over it. I'm like, dude, he's introducing a whole new generation of people to amazing music. What if it spurs, like, what if instead of crapping on it, What if we lifted it up and we got this whole new like rock revival that could come around?
So that's the thing, MGK released that record, which personally I don't think was that great, but it's huge.
Right.
And it's like, wow, like all of a sudden pop punk's on the radio again from one record. Or Miley is now doing the whole 80s rock thing and pop rock thing. And it's like,
I'm way into that. So I guess what I'm saying is like, okay, maybe it's not my favorite thing, but I'm super glad they're doing it, because if I could flip on the radio and hear, in 10 years time from now, there's some new people writing, like you mentioned Fleetwood Mac. I'm like, nobody's writing music like that anymore. That music's so great. I mean, there are people writing music like that, but I just mean like at the time, or this is a silly example, but Nate and I were talking about this. We were like, I just forget. Phil Collins, like, most famous, like, the drum fill, like In the Air Tonight, right? I was like, nobody's writing stuff like that now. That song was like the biggest song when it happened on the radio, but like it takes like 7 minutes before the beat drops in. Like nobody writes music like that anymore,
Mm-mm.
How cool would it be though if a lot of people could like start to love that kind of thing? Or I don't know, there's Pink Floyd songs that take like 8 minutes to get to the climax or whatever. That's some of my favorite stuff, and I guess, I don't know.
Well, that's like
it's dad rock, I guess, at this point, but I think it'd be cool if it could just become rock again.
Yeah, like being like really into pop music, it's like songs for me, like I love when songs are only 2.5 minutes long, because like it's interesting, like the art of saying as much as you can in a short period of time.
True,
like
true.
Like Mark Twain would have written a short book if he had the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that always really interests me. But I love that Bring Me, they started putting out songs that are almost 5 minutes long,
and they're doing these like videos that are like almost like little mini movies and stuff, which is kind of cool. You're giving people a bigger experience.
They get it.
Yeah,
they just
totally
get it.
Different. Yeah,
Yeah,
like whatever it is, it could be anything. They get it.
Yeah, me and Jason talk about how Bring Me is like always just a couple years ahead of literally everybody else.
They really are ahead of everybody.
Everyone's just trying to catch up to wherever they're at.
Yeah,
and to a certain extent, it can be bad for some people, because they do it super obviously. Some bands do, and I think it can be to some of their detriment. But I also think Bring Me the Horizon is in some ways they're doing what the 1975, what I was describing. They're giving you a package that's like, man, this reminds me of, and you can't quite put your finger on it. It's like, is it Linkin Park? Is it like, what is it that it sounds like? You know what I mean? But I love it. It's got that, it's catchy, it's radio friendly, but it's heavy and it's gritty and it's different, and it all just works. And then they can also be like, hey, we'll just put out a record of just like goofing around tracks that are like super artsy.
That's my favorite release by them.
That is Josh's favorite album
that
they have never put out.
Yeah, when I say goofy, I don't mean like in a bad way. I just mean like people just having fun.
Yeah.
Turning
I think
something
every
out.
producer should do that. One, I think Jordan Fish is a genius, and I think Matty Healy is also a genius. If they were to collide, the world would explode. Two, I think that every producer should put out a crazy mixtape like Bring Me did, and like,
cool.
Just for the sake of creating, just like put out art that isn't perfect and put out art that's weird, because, to me, like, I'm at that point where I don't listen to a lot of music because I only listen to things that I like.
Right.
100%. And I'm overly critical of the songs that I listen to. So having something that's so artsy and so off the wall is really refreshing, because I can listen to it like I'm a normal person.
Speaking of that, when you're done here, there are 2 songs that have been released on Epitaph Records by Danny Elfman in the past like two months. Dude, no one is making music like this. Now, as a guy who's a little bit older, I'm like, this totally feels like something that someone would have done in the 90s, because it's so bizarre. But you should just go, I think you'll hear them the same way that I'm talking. Like what you just said, you're like, it's almost like for someone to get your attention, they need to go further than just like, oh yeah, we experimented, we put a different guitar sound on this one. No, like if you got to go further than that. You know what I mean?
Like,
Give me something else.
I want it to sound like an anime intro, but then at the
Yeah.
same time, it needs to sound like Chelsea Grin. Like, there's no in between here. We need the weirdest stuff that we could possibly create. So then that way, I am so hyper focused on the composition that I don't pay attention to how bad the snare sounds.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I need.
The other thing, so me and Joe, I think we've talked about Joe before, Josh. Joe from Get Good Drums.
Oh yeah,
He was the one that turned me on to that Danny Elfman stuff.
It's crazy.
It's
Interesting.
wild.
It's weird. I mean, it definitely feels like almost like you're listening to a weird horror movie soundtrack at times.
You listen to Code
That's what
Orange?
Danny Elfman does. But
Yeah.
then it's like there's a band playing it, and there's like the videos is the whole experience. It's to me, it's like Danny Elfman's like in his 60s. The guys in Bring Me the Horizon are not in their 60s, but there's like a similar energy like that they're tapping into, which is just when I hear the Danny Elfman, especially his latest one, which is called Sorry, his second one that he put out. The first one is called Happy. The second one's called Sorry. But like the second one is like, it's just such a raw, it's almost like he just, for lack of a better way of putting it, it's almost like he just got super wasted and just wrote down a bunch of ideas and then tracked them. There's something about like nobody does that now because it's so easy.
Like,
Well, no,
like
not
whenever-
not nobody does that. There are people doing. I mean, I think hip hop a lot of times has guys that do that, and that's a lot of people love that like raw energy that they come with because they just like smoke a bunch and then lay down whatever comes out of their mouth, you know.
Yeah.
But I think with rock and metal especially, it's just become so easy to like sterilize it.
Yeah, I mean that's
and
all
make
it
it
is.
perfect.
And I feel like a lot of times, like people are afraid of it being too different, and I don't understand why. Because everything sounds the same, so why wouldn't you
Right.
want to make it interesting? Like Code Orange blew up because they were like, "Nah, we're gonna do this," and it worked. And then they brought in all the '90s vibes, and it's just like,
Then they ripped off Death Therapy, and
Yeah.
that's one
Yeah,
of those that's one of those bands where me and
Yeah, when are
me
they
and
going to give
Jason
me
always
that?
look
When are
at
they
them.
going to give me that head nod?
Yeah,
Hat tip,
like-
Death Therapy. They never heard of me. That's
yeah, they
fine.
am. They're just creative people. No,
If they'd take us on tour, that'd be amazing.
true. I'm trying to do that. No,
I'll figure out where they
what I
live,
was
and I'll
gonna
go knock
say-
on their door for you.
What I was gonna say is, so when you're looking at like that level of creativity, and pushing, you're not really pushing the boundaries necessarily, but you're just like combining things in a really weird way. I think Josh would like to know this too. As a songwriter for those things, what is your kind of approach for lyric writing and melody writing for those types of songs?
Well, this is going to be kind of like a shock to some people, probably, I guess. But like, when I decided to write this record, it was an intentional thing to write this third record with someone else, with Nate Washburn. He worked on the second record, but he just did like some production, and he has the producer credit because at the end of the day, he did a ton of the keyboard production, he did a ton of the other stuff. We worked to produce the thing, but I recorded all the vocals with Matt Goldman. I recorded we just recorded everything the way that it was in my head. So I was like, you know what would be cool? I've written these first two records entirely the way I wanted them. What if I wrote with somebody else and just sort of came with really raw ideas? And so there are melodies that I wrote on both of the first two Death Therapy records. There's not really very many melodies on BTA. There was very little singing, mostly screaming. But there's melodies on the first two Death Therapy records. But they're pretty safe. If I had to be honest, pretty safe melodies. They just kind of hang around the tonic, and they get to jump up an octave, and that's where the energy comes from. But then I was like, man, it'd be really cool to just, I don't know. There's some bands that just write really cool. I mean, Radiohead's a band that just writes melodies that are just like, how did he come up with that melody?
9 Inch Nails is similar.
Yeah.
That's how I
And
feel
so
about
I'm
Microwave.
sitting with Nate, and a lot of times, honestly, I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. I've got this idea. I know what the vocal rhythm is going to be because I've spent my whole life writing vocal rhythms. But what if I just tell you the vocal rhythm and then we sit here and brainstorm a melody, And we did that with a lot of songs. And I think for me, that's probably going to be the way I write a lot of stuff going forward, is sort of like, well, let's just, I mean, sometimes you just want to just organically, whatever comes out, this is what I'm going to sing. But it was a lot of fun for me to sort of just like bounce ideas off of someone else and see what they think the melody should be. I think sometimes as a musician, it can be a game of like, I want to be in control. Like, I want to do exactly what's in my head, and I'm scared to hear what somebody else's idea would be. So it's kind of a cool, vulnerable, to me, there's a cool, vulnerable thing to just be like, well, okay, well, what do you think we should do here? When I was in BTA, we were kids, we were 18 when 20 years old when we got signed. We fought all the time. Like, your riffs suck. I hate that riff's dumb. We shouldn't do this song. Like, we just ripped each other apart. Now I look back and I'm like, man, what if we could have been like, okay, well, what if we changed that riff up? You know what I mean? Like, what if we collaborated more and weren't so egotistical or whatever, that narcissistic? So a lot of there's the melodies on the new record are super developed, and we've worked a ton on them. And yeah, I mean, that's not really your question. So like there's one song on this record, which I don't think you've got to hear a rough mix of this one. I'll send it to you later. So. But it almost sounds like a soundtrack to like a Guy Ritchie, like a Jason Statham movie.
Yeah.
It's like super like soundtracky, like weird. It's got all these like horns. It's the one that Chris Bowman played on.
Oh yeah.
Super, super weird track. And we were like, man, is this going to be an instrumental? I was like, no, I got to write some vocals to this. I think I even might have sent it to you at one point when it was an instrumental. I was like, I don't know. No, it was a different song. But anyway, I was like, I got to write some vocals. And so with that, dude, I just literally just threw spaghetti at the wall to see what would work. Like, just went into the vocal booth and just recorded. I was like, well, what if I do this like spoken word poetry over this part? And then what if I yell at this part? And what if I...
Yeah.
So I think maybe sometimes people are scared to try stuff and then it might suck. I know when I was 20 years old in the studio, I wouldn't even let the other guys in the band in the room when I was recording vocals. And that was for screaming vocals.
Yeah.
Like, no pitch involved, no auto-tune. And I was like, no, I don't want anyone to hear this until it's done, because I'm so self-conscious about what if I suck. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just like, all right, Nate, just turn it on and let's see what happens. Like, and a lot of times he's just laughing at me and I'm laughing at myself. Like, okay, yeah, that was really lame. It sounded like Cookie Monster. Let's not do that.
Well, and it helps that Nate is he's such a fun dude to like hang around, and he's so funny.
No, he's a slave master. And he's the worst. No, I'm just kidding.
From like a producer perspective, like, it's being like having to vocal produce, that is like a huge part of, having that connection with the person that you're working with, feeling that comfortability and being able to like you and him, because Nate's not much older than me. He's not that much older than me. And he's
like 83.
Yeah, basically. I mean,
this is super old.
The dude. No,
he's like early 30s, right?
Yeah, but he's like an old soul. Like, he is very much. He is, though, in my opinion.
No, I hear you.
He very much is an old soul, so he vibes with you on another level that I can't. Like, I listen to all the stuff that you and I talk about, but it's not like he's listened to it so much longer, and that's his favorite stuff, and like that's like the stuff he loves the most to produce, and like. So it's that connection between you two on that level is something that is pretty unique, and I think is something from a artist perspective that I think that people should look for more in their producers, is that like connectivity. I think people pick producers because they're like, they worked on a record that they like, or which is fine, right. Or like, they worked on like, this record sounds really cool, but like vibing with that person, I think Josh will back me up, is like almost more important.
Yeah, you want to find somebody that
if
Nate and I have any problem at all, it's that we'll get together in the room and we'll just like, talk for 2 hours before, and we're like, oh crap, we actually got to get to work. Like, we just like hanging out, and so then when we finally do get to recording something, it's just fun. It's like, okay, well, cool, let's try this part. Well, what if we bring out this weird Jesus fish tambourine and try it out for this song? And what if we do, and it's just like, who knows? Like, what's gonna happen? Hey, what if we put like a what if we put like a super weird like noise on this part? And I'm like, well, what kind of noise? You want to find a sample? He's like, no, why don't you just start making noises into the microphone? I'm like, okay, and then to me, I think that's the quote unquote wrong way to make music, but it's so much more fun and rewarding. And it's a shame. It's a shame that it's hard to do that. Budgets are not there for that. And Nate's definitely working for basically nothing to do this record with me. And I just hope that when it's done, people will be able to hear how much fun we had making it and how it brings together. It's like it's rock, it's heavy, it's got electronic stuff, it's got soundtracky stuff, because that soundtracky stuff is definitely something he and I both love. There's just a lot of that kind of stuff. We want the record. We've even talked about when we get the record mastered, like we really want to make sure that it ends up still feeling like a hi-fi soundtracky thing rather than like a super compressed metal thing, because it's not a metal thing at all.
That approach is super different, I think, for anybody because you're still with Solid State, so
right.
Anybody in that Solid State Records, Rise Records, Face Down, Epitaph kind of world, like that's super a different mindset, I think, from anybody else. Josh, you were gonna say
it might backfire. It might be horrible, but but to a certain extent, that's what we've been talking about for the last like 20 minutes, and that's what I'm saying is like that record that Bring Me the Horizon did that Josh loves so much might have backfired, and it did with some people, right? But it also landed a super huge blow for a lot of people. You know what I mean? It was like the strongest punch for a lot of people. So I used to read a lot of C.S. Lewis and stuff because I grew up Christian kid doing that kind of thing. And I can remember when I got to be in college, Bible college, people were like, well, C.S. Lewis, like he believes the wrong stuff about this or that. And I'm like, okay, but like, I'm glad that he was trying stuff. You know what I mean? I'm glad that you know what I mean? I guess that's the theme of what we've been talking about. And
it's better to miss. It's better to miss a really long shot than hit something that's really close and easy to achieve.
I mean, it's super boring to me to just everything's just turns out exactly the same. So somebody might as well just be like, hey, well, what if we made this song sound like I said, that one that we were working on, it's like a Jason Statham soundtrack, but then it's got vocals over top of it. Well, people might hate this song. Okay, we love it. Sounds rad. Maybe somebody will love it, Maybe somebody will hear it and they'll think it's the coolest song they've ever heard, because I can promise they've never heard a song like it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
I'm excited to hear the Jesus Fish in the next Fast and Furious movie.
Yeah, man. Jesus Fish Tambourine. Actually, that Jesus Fish Tambourine didn't work out. It does not sound good.
I don't
think something about the shape.
Right now. I need one.
You're
Jesus
gonna do what,
Fish.
Josh?
I'm ordering one.
You're ordering one right now?
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound quite as good as a regular.
Bro, you could get a 12 count for $18. Straight from China.
Get it.
And I think as we're like winding down on this, I want to kind of go over.
Oh, I thought this was the Joe Rogan
podcast.
I thought we were going for like 4 hours.
Yeah, no,
we don't have. I don't have that kind of attention span.
Yeah, Josh gets really ADD, really quickly.
Like you could tell whenever the podcast is winding down because I start getting real antsy and my internal clock is like it's probably like 50 minutes or so, and
yeah, I think that's you're about right.
I want to kind of give you a chance to give some shouts to some records that majorly influenced you. Mm-hmm. So like, give us like 5 records that like changed your view, and maybe something that you learned from them.
Records that changed my view. Well, when I mentioned this earlier, when I was growing up, I grew up in church. And in youth group, one time I discovered that there was such a thing as Christian rock music. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that it existed. So I discovered this band called MXPX. And they had a record called Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo. Now, that's not necessarily the one that everybody points to. A lot of people point to Life in General.
Yeah.
Which is like a seminal record. But to me, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo is like a perfect pop punk record. It's just like, it's perfect. Every song, there's no skip, there's no tracks to skip. It's just perfect. And I heard that on cassette tape, and I was just like, this is cool. I want to do something like this.
And
that was that was before I even like played an instrument or accidentally ended up in a band. I just remember being like enraptured by it. It's funny because now, I look back and it's like, well, that's so simple, so simplistic. But that hit me so hard, that Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo record.
They were a skate punk then, right? Still?
Yeah, it was. Well, no, I mean, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo is pretty straight up like
A
just
pop
punk.
record.
I mean,
Okay,
it's just
cool.
pop punk.
I could never remember.
It's like it sounds a little bit like Blink 182 kind of stuff, but I mean it's
Yeah.
MXPX.
I know
They've kind of become their own thing, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Earlier they were like into that whole skate punk kind of thing, and then I know they dipped into the pop punk and kind of never left.
Yeah, and I loved that. So then if I zoom forward a little bit, when I accidentally got into a band, the guys were listening to a record by a band called Living Sacrifice, called Reborn. And I was like literally scared. I was scared when I heard the vocalist doing these like growling vocals. And I was like, this is absolutely terrifying. But the fact that everyone else around me thinks it's normal, I was like, okay, I got to figure out why they like this, So I figured out why they like it. And I liked it because of the energy and the rhythms and everything. And that really pulled me in. And then from there, I went like, it's almost like an escalating thing. So like from there, I discovered a band. I discovered Dream Theater, and I heard all their stuff, but like I got into them at exactly the time, which I would say was their greatest moment, which was when they did the Metropolis Part 2 Scenes from a Memory record.
Oh God, that record is so good.
Which is when Jordan Rudess joined the band.
Yes.
And in my opinion, that's just the record. That just it's like, if you want prog rock, that's the record. It just sets the bar. And I remember being so into it that my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was buying me like CDs from the Columbia Record Club. I don't know if you remember the Columbia Record Club, but it was like you sign up and then you pay like a penny for a record, or like 10 records you pick and you get each one for a penny, and you're supposed to like subscribe later, but then nobody ever did. She got me all these Dream Theater records and stuff. It was super cool. I was super into that. And then I was like, from there I was like, okay, like I just want to make music. And that's when I really started, like when I was in, so then I was this dude who like had a background of like, I love poppy music, but like I love the heavy stuff, I love the proggy stuff, and that's where Become the Archetype kind of is born, is through all the heavy and proggy stuff. But then fast forward again to where I'm at now, and now I'm like, okay, well I kind of want to write some poppy stuff. Like I kind of want to write some like catchy hooks, and that's actually more challenging. When I was 20 years old, I thought no man, pop music's easy. Anybody can do that.
Right? That's what I thought too. And then I realized that making something that's simple, good, like also good,
right,
is so much harder.
It's so hard, which is why so few people do it.
I was like,
there's a million bands playing like
all of these Veil of Maya songs like it was nothing, right? And now it's like I'm 23 and I'm still learning how to perfect a 4-chord song,
Right, yeah.
Like it's just totally different.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you told me you're 23, because I think I've probably said like 100 times during this back when I was 20 and I was an idiot. So like, no offense to anyone else who's near 20.
Josh is just.
It was only talking about myself.
Yeah.
No, I'm still an idiot, so it's fine.
Josh got his idiocracy, more of his idiocracy out when he was 18.
There you go. But like, so now I've come back around and like, I mean, I was into stuff back then in the 90s. I was into like, Rage Against the Machine. I was into like even Limp Bizkit, and I was into like, the stuff that was Linkin Park, the stuff. So like all of this stuff in a blender, I want to write, like now I just want to write stuff that just is catchy, but it's got a little dark edge to it, and it's got a little creativity edge to it. Like I'm not a good enough singer to try to be like, well, let me just write some like straight pop music. Like that's not going to happen. But what if I could write some like, I mean, 9 Inch Nails has pop songs. Like, you know what I mean? They're not called pop songs, but they're like, you know what I mean?
They're structured like them.
They're songs that exist in the popular culture. You know what I mean? Like they're in movies, they're in commercials, they're in. Trent Reznor just did the soundtrack to Soul, the movie Soul. I mean, like, which is crazy. You know, the guy from Nine Inch Nails is making movies now,
Disney
soundtracks.
movies.
So
yeah.
So
It's crazy.
if I could end up there one day, that'd be cool.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. Those are some really solid choice records too. Those couple that you listed.
Yeah.
No, I think we are done. Josh, do you have any last questions or anything like that?
Not that I can think of.
Not that you can think of.
I mean, you covered the crazy tour stories.
Yeah,
we talked about like your favorite experience in the studio. Like, I think you covered all the bases, man.
Yeah, and then I, like a year ago, I bought this SM, this 57. This 57 here.
And he's recording a bunch of stuff, and
I this little crappy like little Focusrite Scarlett little interface.
How about
and
this?
And COVID hit, and I was like, okay, well, so there it is. He's got it.
I got one too.
Then COVID hit, and I was like, well, I guess I could just sit down, get a little MIDI keyboard, and I wrote a bunch of like little electronic, instrumental, video game / metal things with tons of MIDI stuff.
That's awesome.
And then I did a cover song, of a Living Sacrifice song from that Reborn record that I was talking about, and then started writing some stuff that I sent to Andrew, and Andrew's produced and put some guitars on for the reversal stuff, and all that's come from literally just having this one microphone and the little Scarlett box and a laptop, and just trying to be like, how can I've always made music in the big studio, but so I guess what I'm saying is I've had great experiences both ways.
Mm-hmm. And Jason uses Reaper.
Yeah, I'm using Reaper to record this. I mean, but even as, I'm almost 40 years old, I feel like I'm just getting started is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, dude.
So,
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. I think that's a great note to land the plane on. You don't need a lot to work, and you can constantly keep growing and feel like you're making new steps forward and making music differently. I think that's pretty cool little nugget of wisdom for everybody. Thank you for hanging out, Jason. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. It was really nice meeting you
guys.
and
Awesome.
hearing your story.
Yeah,
Yep.
dude. Thanks for hanging out, guys. See you next time.
The end.
And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please check us out on your favorite podcasting platform. Leave a review. It helps the show so much. Kind of get out there for new people to find. If you want to watch this, if you aren't already, check us out on YouTube by searching Home Studio Hangout. And thank you so much again for giving us your time and your attention. And remember, keep on creating.